There are many mysteries in the human psyche, but none of them terrifies and fascinates us more than the question of what happens at the moment of death. Who greets us when consciousness finally fades? What forces await us in that ultimate transition? I spent decades exploring the deepest chambers of the human mind, and I believe I know the answer. But my warning about death will shake you to your core. Are you ready to hear what I discovered about our final moments? I didn't just theorize about death from an academic chair. I experienced it firsthand during a near-death experience in 1944 that would forever change my understanding of consciousness and what lies beyond. When my heart stopped beating, I found myself in a place I can only describe as more real than reality itself. But what I encountered there wasn't what most people would expect. And my warning about who meets us when we die will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the afterlife. According to my research and personal experience, the first entity to greet us at death is not a loved one or spiritual guide. It's something far more unsettling and profound. I claim that we are met by our own shadow, the dark aspects of our personality that we spent our entire lives trying to hide, deny, or repress. Imagine taking your final breath only to come face to face with every cruel thought, every selfish act, every moment of cowardice you tried to forget. This isn't punishment, I warn you. It's integration. The shadow has been waiting patiently for this moment when you can no longer run from yourself. But why would I believe such a terrifying encounter awaits us? The answer lies in my revolutionary understanding of the psyche. I discovered that the human mind is divided into conscious and unconscious realms, and within the unconscious lurks the shadow, containing all the parts of ourselves we find unacceptable. During life, we project these qualities onto others, seeing in them the darkness we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. But death, I warn, strips away all pretense. There's nowhere left to hide. My own near-death experience revealed this truth in the most visceral way possible. As I floated above the earth, seeing it as a glowing sphere in space, I was approached by what I could only describe as my own dark double. This figure knew everything about me, every secret shame, every hidden desire, but instead of condemnation, I felt a strange sense of completion. For the first time in my life, I was whole. The light and dark aspects of my being were finally unified. This encounter with the shadow, I believe, is just the beginning of what awaits us after death. Once we've faced and integrated our darkness, we meet the next figure in this cosmic drama, the anima or animus, the feminine aspect within men and the masculine aspect within women. These archetypal forces represent the parts of ourselves we've neglected or suppressed due to social conditioning. How many men have died without ever exploring their capacity for nurturing? How many women have passed away without fully embracing their inner strength? I warn that these neglected aspects of our psyche demand recognition at the moment of death, but the most shocking revelation from my experience was yet to come. After meeting these personal aspects of the psyche, I encountered what I call the collective unconscious made manifest. Imagine suddenly having access to the shared psychological heritage of all humanity. Every myth, every symbol, every archetypal pattern that has ever existed in human consciousness becomes available to you. You realize that your individual life was just one note in a vast symphony of human experience spanning thousands of years. I described seeing archetypal figures that have appeared in every culture throughout history: the wise old man, the great mother, the trickster, the hero. These weren't just symbolic representations, but living, breathing aspects of the human psyche that exist independently of any individual mind. They've been waiting throughout your entire life to reveal themselves, to show you that your personal struggles and triumphs are part of a much larger pattern. The most unsettling part of my warning concerns what happens when we're not prepared for these encounters. If we've spent our lives in denial, refusing to acknowledge our shadow, rejecting our anima or animus, and remaining unconscious of the archetypal forces within us, death becomes a violent confrontation rather than a peaceful integration. I believe that many souls become trapped in what I call the intermediate state, unable to move forward because they cannot accept the fullness of their own nature. But there's an even deeper layer to my warning. I claim that after meeting these personal and collective aspects of the psyche, we encounter something that defies description. The self with a capital S, the totality of our being that encompasses both conscious and unconscious, individual and collective. This is not the ego self we identify with during life, but something infinitely larger and more mysterious. I struggle to find words for this encounter, describing it as meeting God, but not the God of religious tradition. This is the God image within the psyche, the organizing principle that has been guiding our entire life from behind the scenes. My warning becomes even more profound when we consider what this means for how we live. If we know that death will force us to confront every aspect of ourselves we've denied, shouldn't we begin that integration process now? I spent the remainder of my life after my near-death experience teaching people how to make friends with their shadow, how to honor their anima or animus, and how to develop a relationship with the self. I believe that conscious death preparation is the most important work any human being can undertake. The process I describe is not for the faint of heart. It requires brutal honesty about our own nature, the courage to face our darkest impulses, and the wisdom to see that our individual psychology is connected to something far greater than ourselves. But those who undertake this inner work, I promise, will find that death becomes not a fearful ending, but a conscious transition to a new state of being. My colleagues were often disturbed by my descriptions of the death experience. How could someone so rational and scientific speak so matter-of-factly about encountering archetypal forces and cosmic consciousness? But I was unrepentant. I had seen beyond the veil, and what I found there was both more terrifying and more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. The psyche, I realized, extends far beyond the boundaries of individual consciousness, and death is simply the moment when we finally experience our true nature. The warning I leave you is both a challenge and an invitation. If we continue to live unconsciously, denying our shadow, rejecting our contrasexual nature, and remaining unaware of the archetypal forces within us, death will be a rude awakening. But if we begin the work of integration now, death becomes the ultimate initiation, the moment when we finally come home to ourselves. I often spoke about the importance of what I called active imagination, a practice of consciously engaging with the unconscious contents of the psyche. Through dreams, meditation, and creative expression, we can begin to meet these figures before death forces the encounter upon us. The shadow can be acknowledged and integrated gradually rather than confronted all at once. The anima or animus can be honored and developed through conscious relationship rather than discovered for the first time at death. Perhaps most importantly, I taught that we could develop a relationship with the self during life through what I call the individuation process. This is the lifelong journey of becoming who we truly are, not who we think we should be or who others expect us to be. It's a process of conscious evolution that prepares us for the ultimate encounter with our own totality. But my warning contains another layer that most people miss. I believe that the figures we meet at death are not just personal but also collective. We encounter not only our own shadow but the shadow of humanity itself. All the cruelty, violence, and destruction that our species has perpetrated becomes visible. Similarly, we meet not just our personal anima or animus, but the eternal feminine and masculine principles that have shaped human consciousness throughout history. This collective dimension of the death experience explains why I was so concerned about the psychological health of civilization itself. If individuals die unconsciously, carrying unintegrated psychological material, this contributes to the collective shadow of humanity. Wars, genocide, environmental destruction, these are all manifestations of collective unconsciousness, of humanity's refusal to face its own darkness. My vision of death as psychological encounter rather than religious judgment offers both hope and responsibility. We are not passive victims awaiting divine decree, but active participants in our own psychological evolution. The work we do to integrate our psyche during life directly affects the nature of our death experience. More than that, our individual consciousness work contributes to the healing of the collective human psyche. The figures I encountered in my near-death experience were not strangers but aspects of myself I had spent decades trying to understand through my psychological work. The shadow I met was the same one I had been analyzing in my patients for years. The anima was the same feminine force I had been exploring through my study of mythology and alchemy. The self was the same organizing principle I had been trying to understand through my investigation of religious and mystical experiences. This recognition leads to my most profound warning. The death experience is not something that happens to us, but something we have been preparing for our entire lives. Consciously or unconsciously, every dream we ignore, every shadow projection we make, every moment of unconscious living adds to the material we will have to confront at death. But every moment of conscious engagement with our psyche, every shadow integration, every step toward individuation makes the death transition more conscious and less traumatic. My warning is ultimately about the power of consciousness itself. I believe that consciousness is the greatest achievement of human evolution, the quality that separates us from the animals and connects us to the divine. But consciousness is also a responsibility. We are called to make conscious what was unconscious, to integrate what was split, to become whole human beings capable of facing death with awareness rather than denial. The most haunting aspect of my warning is my insistence that this encounter with the totality of our being is inevitable. We can postpone it, deny it, or remain unconscious of it, but we cannot avoid it. Death will strip away all the personas we have worn, all the roles we have played, all the illusions we have maintained about ourselves. We will stand naked before the truth of our own nature, and in that moment, we will either experience the terror of fragmentation or the joy of wholeness. I spent my final years developing what I called a psychology of death and dying, a systematic approach to preparing consciousness for its ultimate transition. I taught that death is not the opposite of life, but its culmination, the moment when all the psychological work of a lifetime finally comes to fruition. Those who have done the work of integration will experience death as a homecoming. Those who have avoided the work will experience it as a violent confrontation with everything they have denied. But perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of my warning is my suggestion that death is not an ending, but a transformation of consciousness. The figures we meet, the shadow, the anima or animus, the self, these are not external entities, but aspects of our own psychological structure that continue to exist in some form beyond physical death. I believe that consciousness itself is eternal, that the psyche extends beyond the boundaries of individual existence. This leads to the final and most profound aspect of my warning. If consciousness continues beyond death, if the psyche is eternal, then the work of integration is not just preparation for dying, but preparation for continued existence in a new form. The degree of consciousness we achieve in life determines the nature of our continued existence. Those who die unconsciously remain unconscious. Those who die integrated and whole continue their evolution in expanded awareness. My warning is ultimately a call to conscious living. Every moment of awareness, every step toward wholeness, every integration of shadow material is preparation for the ultimate encounter with our own totality. Death is not something to be feared, but something to be prepared for through the conscious development of our psychological and spiritual nature. The choice, I insist, is ours. We can live unconsciously and die in terror, or we can undertake the difficult work of integration and die in consciousness. We can meet our shadow as an enemy or as a long-lost friend. We can encounter our anima or animus as a stranger or as a beloved companion. We can face the self as an overwhelming other or as our own deepest truth. My warning about death is ultimately a warning about life. How we live determines how we die. The psychological work we do or avoid during our lifetime directly affects the nature of our death experience. But more than that, the consciousness we develop contributes to the evolution of human awareness itself. We are not just preparing for our own death, but participating in the transformation of consciousness throughout the universe. The figures who meet us at death, I warn, are not there to judge us, but to show us who we truly are. They have been waiting patiently throughout our entire lives for this moment of revelation. The shadow has been trying to get our attention through dreams and projections. The anima or animus has been calling to us through our relationships and creative impulses. The self has been guiding us through synchronicities and meaningful coincidences. My final warning is that death is the ultimate teacher, the experience that shows us the true nature of consciousness and our place in the cosmic order. But we don't have to wait for death to learn these lessons. We can begin the work of integration now, meeting these figures while we still have the opportunity to integrate their wisdom into our conscious lives. The haunting truth of my warning is that we will meet ourselves at death, not as we imagine ourselves to be, but as we truly are. The question is whether we will recognize ourselves or be shocked by the encounter. My promise is that those who undertake the work of conscious integration will find death to be not an ending but a beginning, not a loss but a completion, not a judgment but a homecoming. Are you ready to begin the work of preparing for this ultimate encounter? Are you ready to face your shadow, to honor your anima or animus, to develop a relationship with yourself? My warning is clear. Death will reveal the truth of your being, whether you are prepared or not. The choice is whether you will meet that truth as a friend or a stranger.